Welcome to Sales Development Secrets. Appreciate everybody joining. Today, one of the things we're going to talk about is what I consider one of the hardest areas in sales, which is talking in the hiring space. And to be honest, I think most leaders are horrible at it. My guest today is not. Scott Barton has built teams at ZocDoc and Maven and Bluevine. Scott, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Scott, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm not great at introductions. So let's introduce yourself. What have you been doing? What are you excited about?
Yeah, for sure. I'll touch on some professional stuff and then also personal. So on the work side, I've been in sales for about 15 years. I spent the first 7 or so years of my career as an IC, and then the last 8 as a leader. From an IC standpoint, I was an SDR for a couple of years, and then transitioned to an AE role and did that for about 4.5 years. And then as a leader, I started out in frontline leadership, moved into second line, and then currently serve now as a head of sales over at Bluevine. I would say it's a really exciting time right now. There's a lot of things happening. I think even though there's a lot of noise around AI and a few other things, I think, at its core, like good salespeople will still continue to win. I think there's a lot of things that AI cannot do. And so I think the best salespeople, again, will continue to win and really just leverage AI to enhance what they're already doing. And then outside of that, on the personal front, I grew up in New Jersey, went to a small school in Pennsylvania, and currently live here in Manhattan with my wife and dog. Try to stay active, exercise, work out, play a lot of basketball, try to ski during the winter, come out your way over in Utah. And I think those things help with sales as well.
You know what? I found that those weekends that when I am able to dedicate those evenings and those weekends to the things that are, just recharge me, whether that be skiing or taking the dogs out or hanging out with my wife and kids, that invigorates me so that when I get back in the office, I remember why I'm here. So totally. Maybe that's a whole other episode, right?
Yeah, vacations, yeah. It is.
I will say this: the one thing, dogs sleeping, deciding that they're sleeping where you're sleeping at night in the middle of the night, that does not invigorate you for the next day. So that's the dealt with that last night. Yeah, tell me. I want to dive into something that you mentioned. That there's all the hubbub, everything about AI. Honestly, it's a topic that we talk about almost every episode. What are those things that you see with AI that you said that AI won't replace a salesperson for certain things? What do you see those things being?
Yeah, I think simply put, it's around having a conversation. So in other words, we've even more recently at Bluevine have been testing some conversational AI to have conversations with kind of like our long tail of customers and certain customers that we might be comfortable having them talk to an AI first. I just don't think the technology's there yet. It might be at some point. But in terms of being able to pause at the right moment, knowing when to make a joke, building rapport, and then also overall just being an expert on the product that you're selling. Again, I think there are things in which AI can enhance that, but in terms of having a conversation, that's still yet to be seen. I think there's a bigger narrative around how, a human is still going to want to buy from another human for a bigger ticket item, and yes, that's true, but I don't know, we sell to small businesses, right? We're selling business loans, and while sometimes the dollar amounts might be small, the decisions are still impactful in terms of how it's going to impact their business, their cash flow, their credit, things of that sort. And a good human connection still goes a long way. I think people still want to buy from people that they trust and that they think are experts. So, yeah, that's just what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think, I see that. I think I worked at a fairly technical company. I'll never forget one of the top salespeople. Great, totally, wonderful, nice woman. Loved working with her. She knew absolutely nothing technical about the product. What she knew how to do was develop, build, and leverage relationships, both internally at the company, but also she knew how to to relate with her customers as well and go and solve the problem. She might not know the intricate details of how we did it technically, but she knew, I can talk to Bob over here. Bob knows. and she was that relationship person. I don't see AI replacing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, look, buyers are still going to want people that, again, are the experts themselves or can help provide them leverage, whether that's like what you're saying, helping them get to the answer that they're looking for.
And just to harp on your point a little bit, I think that the difference is, like, if you go to a Michelin star restaurant, right, you want a server and a chef experience there who's going to be taking care of you and worried about you as a person, and part of it's interacting with the restaurateur, etc. However, going to fast food, if I'm just punching in, what I'm ordering and swiping my card, great, right? And I think, I don't see AI becoming a Michelin star chef anytime soon. So
yeah, I think that's a good metaphor. That's a good way to frame it.
Well, I want to dive a little bit into I think one of the I don't know anybody in sales. I know recruiters who love it, but I don't know anybody who is in sales who's, I'm so excited get to hire another round of folks going through that process. Everybody looks at it as such a pain. However, and I think there's so much that's riding on it, right? You've kind of turned that a little bit into a superpower a little bit and focused on it. Talk to me a little bit about, tackling that job, the scorecard that you've built. I want to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it makes sense. And look, it's normal to feel some of that pain, right? It takes work, it takes time. I think what's helped me kind of work through some of that is just having a plan, right? So having a clear plan around the traits that I'm looking for when I'm evaluating people, and then also having a pretty clear plan in place when it comes to that interview process, which I put a lot of thought into, and certainly there are things that I'm looking for, but also, hiring is a two-way street, right? Whenever I'm hiring someone, no matter the role, I take it very seriously that person is looking to make an informed decision for themselves too, in terms of what's the best next step for them in their career. And so the interview process is designed to yes, highlight and show kind of what we're looking for, but also it should give the candidate a good chance to understand the role and kind of the sales work that they're stepping into. So that's kind of the high level. I would say in terms of what I think through, I was able to get exposed to a framework at ZocDoc pretty early on in my hiring days where, long story short, ZocDoc went out and hired a consulting firm to go out and interview our top sales talent, and from those interviews really distill and understand what were the top traits that those salespeople had, and then the plan was to take those traits and use them in an interview process going forward. And with ZocDoc, we had it really structured. Like, there were times where for the 8 traits, like you'd have 4 people and each would take 2, and then you'd have a score on each of those traits. I think that is a good best practice that you can do. There are times where I follow that rigorous structure where it's like every score gets a number. There's also times where I just make sure that the questions that my colleagues are asking are in line with those traits, and then we debrief and talk about it. So I think the bigger that you go, if you're bringing in classes of 10, 15, 20, 30 salespeople every single month, it probably makes sense to be a bit more rigorous just so that you can use quick math to make those decisions. If you're hiring on a smaller scale, I think it's okay to be less rigorous, but still just intentional with what you're looking for and what questions you're asking and things like that. In terms of what some of those traits were, ZocDoc really didn't reinvent the wheel. Like, I'll list some of the traits out, but there are things like courage, resilience, self-awareness, like things like that. But we would really dig in and try to uncover real-life examples of how how the people that we were interviewing, those candidates, demonstrated some of those skills or behaviors in their previous role, and that would give us really clear insight into what we were looking for. We also, in addition to looking at some of those traits, would do role plays, and it's something that I still do today, where again, you can, I think, talk through examples. That's important, but whether you're an SDR trying to get access, or an SMB sales rep doing a discovery call, or an enterprise salesperson who's in the midst of doing maybe one of 3 different discoveries with a few different stakeholders in the buying committee, it's really important to role play at least one of those scenarios during the interview process to get a feel for, 1, how the candidate does, but 2, how they take feedback and kind of work through that during the interview process.
I want to look at some of these traits a little bit, and in iterations that you've used it in. Are there any of those traits that kind of came out and just surprised you?
It's It's a good question. I think nimble learning was one that we talked about a lot, in terms of what that means, like, I feel like nimble is not a common word that most salespeople are saying. Think of it as like your ability to implement feedback, but also your ability to adapt and change. Like, think if there's a new product launch or a big change in the market or a change to your competition, you want to have really good salespeople that can adapt to those changes and they can pivot and maybe adjust their talk tracks and the process that they're following to still get the same, if not better, results that they were getting.
The thing that I've always run into is that it seems like in interviews, resumes, if you were to go to them, and one of the ones you mentioned was courage. Are you a courageous person? Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah, I'm 100% courageous. Unless you don't want someone courageous, in which case I'm a coward. I'm an absolute coward. Yes. So, I'm not asking for the specific questions necessarily, but like, what are some of the ways that you would, dive deeper than maybe just a surface level, question about those issues?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing to talk about. I mean, look, to that point, like, I like hiring people that are competitive, and I've asked people, hey, are you competitive? Yes, great. Can you give me an example? And like, it doesn't have to be the craziest thing. What I'm listening for is like healthy competition amongst your team, a spiff that you were looking to win, trying to be the top performer, right? Like things of that sort. On the courage front, there's a couple ways to go about it. I think if you're hiring a leader, it's great to try to understand if there was a time where maybe they disagreed with their boss and like what that topic was, and then what took place thereafter. Like, did they push back? How did they push back? What was the result? What does that look like? Because inevitably you're going to disagree. The same can be applied to, if you're a rep working with a manager. Hey, was there a time where your manager gave you guidance and you disagreed with it? Was there a policy that you have to follow that you disagreed with? Like, what does that look like? And so courage doesn't have to be like, that's like the context that I'm thinking through, right, with courage in like a workplace setting. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. When it comes to, we mentioned AI earlier. How are you how are you leveraging AI in kind of in the hiring process?
Yeah, there's a couple different things. We are using it to help screen resumes as part of it, just to help us like pick up on certain keywords and companies and things that we're looking for. I use it for some of the role play inspiration, just even like what industry should we role play, what types of objections should we see, what are some common objections to that. I'm using it a little bit there, not a ton, I would say, but just for some ideas around like that role play.
Are there some places where, because I think that needs to be that clear line between where you use AI and where you don't. Are there some areas where you're like, no, this has got to be in this process, this has to be human?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Like I used to, when I was hiring SDRs back in the day, I would follow the same interview prompt that Jeremy Donovan spells out in his Leading Sales Development book. And part of that includes just writing an email, right? And if you think back to like 7 or 8 years ago, yeah, you could have someone write an email for you, but like generally speaking, like you get a pretty good feel on the type of email and like context within it that someone would write. Nowadays, it's way different, right? Because you can use a number of different LMs and get a few different outputs. So I don't know if you need to throw away that part of the process, but I think there's just more of an emphasis on like the structure, the length of an email, how you write certain things. And then you really just need to dig into like why they put what they put, right? Like how intentional were they about what their subject line is, how they frame things. Are they using a traditional like problem statement, then value, then call to action? If so, why? So I think that part is getting really interesting in terms of writing, right? Because I think you should be using AI for it, but you also want to hire people that are intentional about it and understand like why they're sending out what they're sending.
You're shifting into like managing the team. You're running kind of a high velocity SMB motion. Talk to me a little bit about that in selling to the small business owners. How does that motion differ from enterprise, and how does the hiring even differ from enterprise?
Yep, it's a much different motion. It's traditional SMB, so think like pretty short sales cycle, under 2 weeks, smaller deal size, monthly quotas. very high volume in terms of leads. Whereas in enterprise, right, if you're thinking true enterprise, where maybe you just simply need to close a couple deals in a given year, granted those deals could be of a very high value, it's far, far different. I think the biggest things that we're looking for is we need people to, come in and work really hard every day and follow a process in a consistent way to achieve the right results. Like, in other words, there's always some variability in terms of the conversations that you're having, the customers that you're speaking to, but the same principles or KPIs around like your speed to lead, how many leads you're working, your contact rate, or how many leads you're getting in touch with, all are really important, and there needs to be a ton of consistency and discipline around that. The good thing is there's good math behind it, right? So while it's not totally predictable, if you put in the right amount of work in those specific areas, there's a high likelihood that you'll achieve the results you want to achieve. I think for enterprise sales, it's much different, right? It's you're chasing those bigger deals, you're on a plane every couple weeks, building pipeline looks a lot different. When you get into active deal cycles, you're multi-threading and working with buyers and champions, and also, I just think for most enterprises, when you're trying to replace an incumbent, you're just working up against timing or pre-existing contracts and other things that are a bit out of your control. So I think the motions are vastly different. So we're looking for people that, again, have really high courage, that are incredibly resilient and can overcome those setbacks on a daily basis, but also are adaptable, right? They are still coachable. They have good self-awareness, and can kind of leverage those things to get the job done.
Kind of taking maybe a step up the funnel a little bit, talking about SDRs. You've been an SDR. You've built out the function when you were at Maven. How is that role changing now? Do you hire less? Do you hire more? What does that look like in practice?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely changing. I think the short answer is that yes, you are probably hiring less, but it's really interesting because 7 or 8 years ago, there was a lot of talk about scale with SDRs, and what that really meant was for a company that had product market fit, once you had a good feel for the types of outreach sequences or sales loft cadences that you were using, a good feel for KPIs, and maybe to some extent some traits that you wanted to look for, you could really just continue hiring people that had those traits and have them follow that same process and play the numbers game and get results. I think today that's becoming harder and harder to do because you can't really email blast like that anymore. It's getting continually harder to cut through the noise, whether it's email or phone, to get in touch with people. And I think people are just more skeptical in general, so it's becoming increasingly difficult. I think what's happening now is sales leaders are looking for SDRs that, yes, will work hard and can follow a process, but are doing things that necessarily aren't scalable, which is tougher to make a case for when you're thinking about growth and hiring for the team. But you really need to find people that, again, can do things that are unscalable. One example of what that means is at Maven, one of our top SDRs was just absolutely relentless. And one of the things this person did when it came to LinkedIn was this person found that people on LinkedIn, buyers, we were selling to HR, were far more likely to respond when they were active on LinkedIn. And so if you or I were to go to our LinkedIn right now, click on My Network, look at your connections, and you can see like your recent connections. The people that are online that are maybe on the desktop or in the app, they have a green dot. Like they just have that green dot. It's similar to like social media, right?
Right.
And so this SDR was messaging people only when they had their green dot on. And they were doing this sometimes during the workday. I think they were probably doing it like when they're having their coffee in the morning, maybe even sometimes at night, which again isn't the most scalable thing or something that you can put into like a playbook or teach tape, right? But this person was getting great results, and there wasn't like a formal, I send this amount of messages every week at these times. They were just kind of doing it between things and getting results from it, right? So if you can find people that can kind of hack their way through and cut through the noise that way, maybe not just with that tactic, but things like that, you'll be better off. And I think that's where organizations are moving, right? Where you're having a smaller team with people like that can think outside the box and drive results.
Yeah, that's something that like maybe at some point AI will recognize, okay, green dot, send a message, but
True.
It's the concept of creativity and thinking about like, something that a different way of doing things that you may have done, done before. I love that example. One of the things that I think has really soured a lot of people to the SDR role, or even in tech sales or the tech world, is this constant habit that I've seen over the years where it's like, hey, let's hire 50 BDRs, and sure, we're going to get rid of 40 of them, but the 10 we're going to have are going to be awesome, and then we'll hire 40 more, and 50, and then get rid of. Talk to me a little bit about kind of the cost of overhiring. It used to be kind of like hey, just hire yourself into success and functionality, but you advise against that.
Yeah, there's a big cost to it. I think these are probably the days like ZERP era where capital was a bit easier to come by, and it's like, sure, we just raised a bunch of money, let's invest X amount right here. But there's a huge cost to it. There's a huge time investment from whoever is doing the training and onboarding. So think from recruiting all the way through the frontline managers, enablement, if there's that, other cross-functional team members. There's also, it really just negatively contributes to the culture and the morale that you're trying to build, where if you're looking to build a world-class sales org, which most people are, and you're right, like not retaining 80% of your new, entry-level hires, it just, again, it doesn't create a good vibe on the floor. I've been a part of some of those orgs too, where it is that kind of cutthroat, and it's just not healthy for the business.
Yeah. So would you say, hey, like have maybe less than what you think you need and kind of ease your way into it? Or how would you kind of advise building out teams like that?
Yeah, it's hard. I think the way you want to be lean, right? I think being lean appeals to your investors, your board, senior leadership, but at the same time, you need to be thoughtful and think ahead, right? You need to, as best you can, think through things like, attrition and maybe who's a flight risk and who's going to leave. You need to think through performance management and just, critically look at your team and just try to figure out and maybe predict who might not be around for a number of reasons. There's also the positive side to it too, where ideally most sales orgs, SDR is a feeder role where you promote most people into account executive, those people can get into leadership, maybe they even go in other directions like recruiting or marketing or even operations I've seen. So I think that's part of it too. So I think thinking through those things, also understanding that when you hire someone, you're not getting the results right away, which you can map out. And I've seen that work well, where it's tough to fit all of what I've just described into a spreadsheet to show to a senior sales leader or someone in finance who's really thinking about P&L and different budget line items. But you can model in ramp and at least just forecast like, hey, if we hire this one person, what are the expected results on a month-by-month or quarter-by-quarter basis, just to help understand like the ROI there in terms of when, especially if you're hiring mid-year, right, in kind of the midst of maybe your financial plan. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, great. Hey, I appreciate it. Like honestly, you're saying some things that I think have needed to be said a lot about team building. And I don't mean team building like, hey, let's go do trust falls, but like actually building the actual team. If someone has questions or they want to, connect on this, LinkedIn the best way to reach out for you if you've got the green dot.
Yeah, green dot only, no, but LinkedIn's great. Yeah. First name -- last name -- sales if you need the URL, but yeah, LinkedIn's good.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you hopping on and talking about this. I think it needs to be talked about more. I think we've seen that kind of that bad cycle way too much, and we don't need to do that anymore. So appreciate it, and we'll catch you guys all in the next one. Thank you.